guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. Sort of an interesting one today. Half of this is going to be looking at a topic that I found really interesting in a reread of one of the stranger Star Wars Legends novels. Then at the end, I'm going to take a few of the shorter hashtag AskGet questions, which I've liked, but probably aren't long enough for an entire video. Hope that makes sense. Before we begin though, I do have a quick favor for you guys. You may have noticed that for the past 5 years, I've used footage from an awesome Star Wars Empire War mod. Marmar, the editor for this video, will probably put some in. It's Thrawn's Revenge by my very good friend Corey Loses, the guy that runs that podcast with me, Tapcaf Transmissions. Basically, it's set in my favorite era of Star Wars Legends. You can play as the New Republic or the Empire or really any faction from the day after the Death Star blew up all the way to just before and eventually during the Yuuzhan Vong War. Anyway, right now ModDB is having its vote for Mod of the Year, and I'm going to ask that you vote for one of Corey's mods, either Thrawn's Revenge, which is my favorite, or Fall of the Republic. You can vote as many times as you want. Let me know your number down below, and I'll, be forever grateful. Anyway, about 2/3 of the way through the New Jedi Order book series, the series featuring the Yuuzhan Vong invasion, there was the Enemy Lines duology, 2 books, which I actually quite like, especially the first one. In short, the New Republic has essentially fallen. Wedge and many of the heroes set up a base on Borlias, a former location from the Rogue Squadron series, and their goal really is to keep the Vong busy. They do so and eventually secure a major victory through 2 bold and aggressive strategies named Emperor's Hammer and Emperor's Spear, which sees the Lusankya, the New Republic Super Star Destroyer, first orbitably bombard the Vong forces on Borlias, then ram itself into their world ship. But as this is happening, Luke Skywalker feels a dark disturbance coming from the Vong captured Coruscant. So using orbital insertion pods, he, along with a small strike force, return to the planet. There they discover one of Palpatine's most devious creations. Coruscant has too many people. Everyone knows that. You may also know that most aspects of the weather are artificially controlled. The weather, for example, is managed by platforms in space. The planet is also reliant largely on imported goods for the survival of the citizens. What we learn in Rebel Stand Book 2 is that Coruscant also relies on a series of hidden, top-secret environmental stations. These scrub the air, removing toxins and basically making the planet livable, at least for, many species. These, and they were called complexes, were completely self-sufficient, they were extremely well hidden, and they were only managed by autonomous medical droids. It's implied that Palpatine created these stations. What Coruscant was doing beforehand, I don't know, but he was so intent on keeping them secret that everyone involved in their construction was actually killed. That's kind of an old trick of his. I believe he did the same with the Maw installation, he did the same with Biss, but continuing. The secondary feature of these stations was to exert control over Coruscant itself. You ever seen Total Recall? Kind of a similar thing. If the planet gets out of hand, Palpatine was going to shut the air off. Here's a quote from the book. Luke raised an eyebrow over that. Exert control? You mean in times of revolution he'd cut off the air? That is correct. Should the Emperor need to regain control or merely cause billions to die, he could threaten to shut off the complex and strangle Coruscant in its own wastes. Merely cause billions to die. Luke shook his head over that turn of phrase. This doesn't conflict with your medical programming? Oh no, sir. Implementation of such an operation would be at the Emperor's sole discretion and by his own hand. So yeah, Palpatine was ready to kill Coruscant at a whim, and apparently he had the ability to do so. I mean, Sheev had lots of sketchy things going on the planet. He also had a Super Star Destroyer hidden under the city structure. There were many secret places, and these stations also served a third purpose, the creation of a beast. And this is one of the weirdest parts of the Yuuzhan Vong War, this one book and this one sort of subplot. Ever read Children of the Jedi? I hope so, or else this is going to be really weird. In that book, we meet Roganda and Eric Ismarin. Roganda could have had a relationship with Palpatine, although it seems like that's not the case, but Eric was perhaps Palpatine's biological son. He was implanted with a thing in his brain that allowed him to control machines through the Force. That ties into the Eye of Palpatine. Luke says it pretty well. Who was Eric Ismarin? He was a dark Jedi in training, a son of either the Emperor or one of Sarkev Quest by a woman named Rogana Ismarin. She was a crazy woman who modified her son with computer implants. My sister Leia ran into him on Belsavis, about 15 years ago. Anyway, Children of the Jedi concludes with Eric basically falling down a hole. He's then brought back for Rebel Stand hand, and yes, it's as weird as it seemed, a random character from a very unpopular book brought back 8 years later. But it's revealed that after the events of Children of the Jedi, he returned to Coruscant with his mother. He took up station inside one of these atmospheric pods, with his mother wanting to build him into the ultimate dark Jedi. Unfortunately, during a training exercise, he took a lightsaber to the brain. He was put into suspended animation and had most of his body covered by hypoallergenic armor with, and I quote, portions of its brain pertaining to human memory largely replaced by computer apparatus. Additionally, even in suspended animation, Eric was implanted with growth chemicals and hormones which kept him growing to the point where he's 9 feet tall. Also, I'm sorry I don't have more imagery for this. There's like one image of Eric, or Lord Nyax is the name he goes by after emerging and waking up again. He was kept in suspended animation by a series of Islamari, but during the Yuuzhan Vong invasion, they're killed. He wakes up and goes crazy. He's incredibly powerful with the Force, basically contesting directly against Luke. As I mentioned, he's 9 feet tall, he's covered in armor, and also lightsaber blades. What he's trying to do is reach a Force nexus on Coruscant. He does that by basically dominating and controlling the minds of living non-Yuuzhan Vong on the planet, but he's eventually killed by Luke in a confrontation where both have heightened Force powers because they're close to the nexus. It's pretty ridiculous. Like, it's probably one of the closer moments Star Wars gets to like Dragon Ball Z. We're talking Luke using Starkiller level powers here, but at the end there's also the implication that he's probably still alive, although he'd only ever appear in those 2 books. But yeah, that's Lord Nyax and Eric alongside Palpatine's plan for controlling Coruscant. This ended up going way longer than I expected, so I'm just going to choose a couple of the hashtag AskAt questions, answer them very quickly. This first one is from Quantum Maniac. He asks, what do the rank and file Imperials expect succession to be in the case of Palpatine's death? I mean, him being a Sith Lord wasn't obvious, and he was old. That's a great question. I assume that they didn't worry about it and figured one of the higher ranking Imperials would take over if necessary, and that was part of the problem. In both canon and Legends, the Empire fell completely out of whack after Palpatine's death, to the point where, in Legends at least, it was Pelion, not even that high ranking of an individual, who called for the retreat at Endor, and after that, ships kind of just went on their own way. I assume the rank and file members didn't worry about it, but that officers probably did. But I mean, until you're highly ranked, you probably just say, well, I'll follow whatever my superior does. I don't know. That's a good question, though. The next one comes from Red Star Notoriety, who says, how does time stay constant in the Star Wars universe, considering time dilation and general theory of relativity? And yeah, that would be a problem, except science doesn't work that way in Star Wars. Your perception on the passage of time is not affected by the speed in which you're traveling or your proximity to very large objects as it is in the real world. The last question for today, Martin asks, I'm rereading the Republic Commando series and it states that Etienne has difficulty sensing droids. It's probably Etan. I actually don't know how you say her name. But yeah, that's common. You can't sense droids. It's the same way that you can't sense the Yuuzhan Vong. Now, what some Jedi do is figure out ways around that. Even if you can't sense droids because they're not living beings, maybe you can sense a sort of general sense of danger or the stepping of something on the floor. It's sort of like how when fighting the Yuuzhan Vong, okay, you can't grab its neck, but you can pull away all the air from around it, or you can electrify the air around it, or throw something through the area. But I've not read that series in a very long time, so I'm going to leave it at that. Anyway, guys, all for now. Be safe, have a good one, may the Force be with you.